The sky over Varian 3 looked wrong. It wasn't just the burning clouds drifting like torn veils over the horizon, or the streaks of molten orange weaving through a sky that should have been pale blue. It was the silence, the kind of silence that followed catastrophe, the hush of a world holding its breath as everything fell apart. Sergeant Elias Wren checked his radiation counter for the seventh time. The numbers kept climbing. Not enough to kill him yet, but enough to remind him he was running out of time. Gamma Team, Colonel Varen's voice crackled through his helmet. You have 80 minutes before the reactor zone becomes unserviceable. Sweep quickly. Copy, Elias replied, motioning to his unit. We clear the remaining structures, then we move. The agricultural colony had been a joint human, Velari settlement for 5 peaceful years, until a seismic spike no one predicted ripped the primary reactor apart. Now a countdown hovered over the entire colony, evacuate or die. His team fanned out through the fractured residential block. Splintered support beams leaned like dying trees. Fires guttered in half-collapsed hallways. The air shimmered with radiation heat. 2 structures left, Elias muttered, checking his map. Residential tower and a research annex. The tower first, Private Torrens said. More civilians likely. Annex sweep, Elias asked. Private Lysa raised her hand. I'll take it, sir. Quick pass, in and out. Go, Elias ordered. Call anything unusual. He moved with the rest of the squad toward the residential block, stepping over broken tiles and shattered glass. His HUD flickered with life sign readings, most faint, some fading out entirely. Before he could reach the first door, Lysa's voice snapped through the comms, tight and urgent. Sergeant, life sign in the annex. Sublevel 2. Very faint. Elias froze. Sublevel 2 meant deep below the support structure, likely unstable. Status of the building, he asked. Bad, multiple fractures, electrical fires. Last quake hit this level hard. Pull back, Elias said immediately. I'm coming. Sir, I can. That's in order. He was already sprinting. The annex loomed like a wounded beast, walls cracked and sagging, smoke curling out of ruptured vents. His suit painted the entire structure red, imminent collapse. He ignored it and pushed inside. The corridor lights spasmed, throwing shadows like frantic gestures. Particles drifted through the air, caught in the flicker. The floor dipped under his boots, never a good sign. He descended the stairwell, testing each step before placing full weight. The deeper he went, the hotter the air became. Sublevel 2 looked like the planet itself had tried to swallow it. His scanner pointed him to the northeast corner, half buried under collapsed ceiling panels and torn cables. And there she was, a Velari woman, tall, elegant even in ruin, dressed in ceremonial scholar robes embroidered with shimmering silver threads. A section of a ceiling slab pinned her leg. Her long hair, silver black, silky even under dust, fell over a face too still. Her skin glowed faintly, that ethereal bioluminescence unique to highborn Velari. Her ears, gracefully elongated, trembled on the edge of consciousness. She was alive, barely. Elias knelt beside her. Ma'am, can you hear me? Her eyes fluttered open, radiant amethyst meeting the dark visor of his helmet. She whispered something in her language, soft and melodic. He didn't understand. He didn't need to. He braced himself, gripped the slab, and heaved. His suit's servos screamed. The ceiling groaned, dust cascaded like falling ash. But the slab lifted just enough. He slid her leg free and lifted her into his arms. She weighed less than expected, Velari bone density, but she was limp, fading. The building noticed. A low groan vibrated through the floor. His alarm spiked red. The ceiling above him sagged like melting wax. Move, he hissed to himself, running. A support beam crashed behind him, sparks erupting. Fire burst from ruptured conduits, heat slamming into his shields. The woman stirred weakly, her hand rising to touch the side of his helmet with a tenderness that cut through the chaos. She whispered again, this time slower, intentional. He had no idea she was sealing the first half of a sacred Velari rite older than human civilization. He barreled through a falling stairwell, leaping over collapsed chunks of wall, shouldering through a corridor that twisted under structural failure. The emergency exit was ahead, crushed halfway down but still open enough for him to slide through. The explosion hit behind him just as he cleared the threshold. The shockwave hurled him forward. He shielded the woman with his body, skidding across fractured pavement until momentum finally died. His suit flickered warnings across his vision. Temperature spikes, structural strain, oxygen red lines, but she was breathing. Medics rushed in, taking her gently from his arms. Her eyes opened halfway. She looked directly at him. No confusion now, only intent. She spoke a phrase clearly. Her voice was velvet over steel. Then she went still as the medics lifted her onto a stretcher and whisked her toward the final evacuation shuttle. Elias knelt in the dirt, suit failing, lungs burning, staring after her. Private Lysa approached, wide-eyed. "Sir, that was insane. You carried her out of a collapsing building." Elias forced a weak breath. "Don't try it at home." Lysa laughed shakily. "No danger of that." But the look she gave him said it all. People would talk about this. The colony burned behind them. The sky rained with ash. He had done what he always did, save who he could. He didn't know he'd just bound himself to a Velari noble through a ritual he'd never heard of. He didn't know her words had been an ancient. 3 days after the evacuation of Varian 3, Sergeant Elias Rehan expected a routine debrief, a stern lecture about unnecessary risks, maybe a commendation buried under criticism. He did not expect a summons marked mandatory diplomatic presence, and signed by both Human Command and the Velari High Council. That was the first sign something was off. The second sign was Colonel Varin looking tired, not angry, not disappointed, just tired, in the way officers looked when they were about to deliver news that made absolutely no sense. "You're going to want to brace yourself, Sergeant," Varin murmured as they walked down the polished hallway of the Alliance Embassy. "The Velari delegation has opinions about your rescue." "Good ones?" Elias asked. Varin didn't answer. That was the third sign. They entered a chamber arranged with ceremonial precision. Human officers on the left. Velari nobles on the right, tall, graceful, robed in shimmering textiles that shifted like liquid starlight. Their elongated ears twitched subtly at every sound. Their expressions were masks of formal expectation. In the center of the room stood her, the woman he had carried out of the collapsing research annex. Clean now, composed, beautiful in a way that made the air feel thinner. Her skin still held a faint bioluminescent glow, especially along her cheekbones and collarbones, signifiers of highborn Velari lineage. Her hair, now intricately braided with silver rings, fell in shimmering waves down her back. Her amethyst eyes were clearer than before, sharp with intelligence, and something heavier, something ceremonial. She was flanked by nobles whose robes alone cost more than Elias' annual salary. The moment he stepped inside, she turned toward him. Every Velari in the room straightened. Every human suddenly watched him. Her gaze found him like gravity. She stepped forward, voice ringing through the chamber, clear and melodic. "Elias Rehan, you took me from death. Now finish what you began." Silence crashed down like a vacuum. Elias blinked, once, twice. "Pardon." Even Colonel Varin shifted uncomfortably. The Velari woman's expression softened, only slightly, but enough to reveal patience layered atop expectation. She tried again, slower. "During the collapse, when you carried me from mortal danger, you initiated the Kavari'thaal, the bond of salvation. Ancient, sacred, binding." She stepped closer. "You lifted me, you bore my weight. You shielded me with your body as fire fell from the ceiling. You heard my words as your final act before delivering me to safety." Elias swallowed. "Ma'am, I don't speak Velari." A quiet ripple moved across the Velari ranks, sympathy mingled with disbelief. "That is understood," she said, "but your ignorance does not negate your action." One of the elder nobles stepped forward, thin, regal, adorned with crystalline ear cuffs that caught the light like ice. "Sergeant Rahan," he said in smooth, accented standard. "I am Elder Thalen of the High Council. The words Lady Saralyn spoke to you as she touched your visor were the ancient acknowledgement of the chosen bond. You accepted by lifting her from death's reach." "I didn't accept anything," Elias said carefully. "I just saved her life." "Precisely," Thalen replied. "And in Velari law, that act performed with risk to yourself binds protector to protected." Elias felt the room tilting as if the gravity had shifted. He looked at the woman, Lady Saralyn. Her gaze held steady, unwavering but not cruel, more like she was waiting for him to catch up. "I'm sorry," Elias said slowly, "but where I come from, saving someone doesn't mean I'm suddenly married to them." Saralyn's brows lifted a fractional amount. "Not insult, amusement maybe. It is not marriage in your sense," she said, "but it is a bond, a vow. The Kavari'thaal marks protector and protected as linked in duty, honor, and life. It is older than our starfleets, older than our empire." She paused, "and it is not optional." That part made every human officer in the room stiffen. Colonel Varin stepped forward. "With respect, Elder Thalen, Sergeant Rahan acted without knowledge of your customs. Surely there must be a method to annul." "There is not," Thalen said smoothly. "No hostility, just ancient certainty." Saralyn took a single slow breath. "Sergeant Rahan," she said, "I am Lady Saralyn Velaris, heir to the House of Velaris, scholar of ancient rites, council delegate and speaker of the old tongue. I will explain this clearly." She lifted her hand, elegant, steady, glowing faintly in the dim light. "When you carried me, you bore responsibility for my life. When you shielded me, you accepted risk on my behalf. When you set me down before witnesses, and I spoke the recognition words, the bond formed." She stepped closer, now only a meter away. "What remains is completion, a ceremony, an oath, a formal acceptance of what already exists." Elias' heartbeat thudded in his ears. "This is a lot," he said. "Yes," Saralyn agreed softly, "for both of us." He searched her face, looking for resentment, annoyance, anything. Instead, he found resignation. And something else, respect. "How can I agree to something I don't understand?" he asked. "You cannot," she said simply, "so I will teach you." Her directness startled him. She gestured to the room. "All these gathered expect the ritual to proceed. Our laws acknowledge what has already been spoken. But she placed a hand gently, briefly on her chest. "I will not bind you to me through confusion. I will not drag a human into oath without clarity." The nobles behind her murmured disapproval. Saralyn ignored them entirely. "The ceremony requires only words," she continued. "An oath of protection from you. An oath of loyalty from me, nothing more." "And after that," Elias asked. "After that," she said, "we determine together what partnership means." The way she said together carried surprising weight. He exhaled. "So if I say yes, I become your protector." "Chosen protector," she corrected softly. "Not servant, not possession, my equal, my shield as I am yours." "And if I say no?" The room went still. Elder Thalen spoke. "Refusal would be seen as rejection of Velari law, a deep insult, possibly a threat to our alliance. And Lady Saralyn would remain bound regardless, only without a partner to fulfill the rite." Elias looked sharply at Saralyn. "You'd stay bound even if I walked away." Her eyes did something then, softened just briefly. It wasn't sorrow. It was acknowledgement of the burden on her. "I would," she said quietly. "That is why I ask you to finish what you started, not for my people, but for fairness." That hit him harder than all the politics. He had never been a man who abandoned duty halfway. Never the kind who left someone carrying the weight alone. He took a slow breath. "Tell me what I have to say." Saralyn's posture eased, barely, but enough to show relief. The room erupted into motion as the elders prepared the ceremonial tablets and witnesses arranged themselves. A low hum filled the air, ancient Velari coordinates activating, shimmering with holographic script. Saralyn stepped before him, luminous and steady. "Repeat after me, Sergeant Elias Rahan," the officiant instructed. Elias inhaled. He spoke the words, "I acknowledge the bond forged in fire." Sarah eyes glowed faintly. "I accept the role of chosen protector." A ripple of energy passed between them. "I stand with Lady Sarah Velari in duty and in honor." Something inside the chamber tightened like a lock turning. When he finished, Sarah spoke her own vows, first in Velari, voice melodic and ancient, then in human standard. "I acknowledge the bond forged in salvation. I accept the role of companion and protected. I stand with Sergeant Elias Rehan in loyalty and counsel. As he shields me, I support him. As he protects me, I walk beside him. This I swear." The final resonance faded. The ritual was done. The bond was real. Sarah extended her hand, not for a human handshake but palm forward in the Velari gesture of acknowledged unity. Elias mirrored it. Their palms hovered an inch apart, no contact needed. The bond thrummed like static between them. When it settled, Sarah spoke quietly only for him. "Now we begin the part that is not ritual." He blinked at her. "Which part is that?" Her lips curved barely but unmistakably. "The part where we learn how to live with this." Elias followed the Velari attendant down a corridor so polished it reflected the lights like a mirror. The air smelled faintly of some floral resin, clean, crisp, and unmistakably alien. He felt underdressed in his standard-issue uniform, especially after the ceremony where everyone else shimmered like moving constellations. At last, the attendant stopped before a pair of curved doors carved with flowing Velari script. "Your quarters," the attendant announced. Elias nodded. "Mine." The attendant blinked, confused. Velari eyelids closed diagonally like sliding glass. "Yours," he repeated, "and Lady Sarah S." Elias froze. "Both of us. In the same space. It is required. The bond pairs must cohabit. This suite has been adjusted to accommodate both human and Velari environmental preferences." Before Elias could protest, the doors opened with a whisper. The suite was enormous, far too luxurious for a sergeant. A sunken sitting area upholstered in silvery textiles, a central table made of living crystal that pulsed faintly with trapped starlight, two separate sleeping chambers, and a panoramic window revealing the soft violet glow of the Velari capital below. He stepped inside and stopped again. Sarah was already there. She stood near the window, the light painting her in soft radiance. Her ceremonial robes had been replaced with simpler garments, still elegant, still undeniably noble, but less intimidating. Her hair, freed from most of its ceremonial braids, fell in smooth, shining waves down her back. She turned when she sensed him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elias cleared his throat. "So, these are our quarters." Sarah nodded. "Tradition dictates shared residence for bonded pairs. It symbolizes unity of purpose. But I have already requested separate sleeping chambers." "Thank you," Elias said, relieved. "I didn't want to assume anything." "You assume correctly," she replied calmly. "The bond requires duty, not forced intimacy. We will not share more than either of us chooses." That eased the tension in his chest, though another kind remained, a quieter thread of curiosity about the regal woman standing before him. Sarah gestured gracefully toward the seating area. "Shall we talk? The officiants may understand our laws, but they do not understand us." He followed her and sat opposite, sinking into a chair that shaped itself to his form in ways he found unnerving. The silence between them wasn't awkward, more like they were both acknowledging that their lives had just changed in ways neither had planned. Sarah spoke first. "I would like clarity between us," Elias ran. "Please," he said. "Clarity would be great." She folded her hands in her lap, posture immaculate. "The Kavari'thaal is sacred to my people, but it does not force emotion. It does not compel affection or allegiance beyond duty." She paused. "I will not expect you to play the role of husband or intimate partner. The bond can exist purely as mutual obligation." Elias nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, But what exactly is expected of me? Saralyn met his eyes. Her gaze was direct, searching, not cold. You are my chosen protector. In Velari culture, that means several things. She lifted one elegant finger. First, you stand beside me in matters of danger, physical, political, or diplomatic. Another finger. Second, your counsel is valued. The protector is not subordinate but a partner whose perspective tempers the strengths and blind spots of the protected. Third finger. Third, transparency. We are expected to communicate openly to prevent misalignment. Many bonded pairs fail because they treat the bond as symbolic rather than lived. Fourth and finally, presence. Not constant but reliable. Our lives are now linked. Your actions reflect on me and mine on you. Elias absorbed that in silence. That's a lot, he admitted. Yes, Saralyn said softly, and unfair to ask of someone who did not choose this. That isn't your fault, Elias said immediately. I ran into that building on instinct. I didn't think about anything except pulling you out. Something shifted in her expression, subtle but warmer. Instinct, she murmured. You risked your life for a stranger. It's what soldiers do, Elias said. No, she corrected gently. What good soldiers do. Many would have weighed risk and reward. You leapt without hesitation. She looked at him as though trying to solve a puzzle. That is why the bond recognized your act. The Kavari'thaal doesn't respond to simple rescue. It responds to intent, to willingness to face death for another. I wasn't thinking that deeply. Exactly, she said, leaning back. Instinct reveals truth. For a moment, Elias didn't know what to say. Saralyn's voice softened. What do you require to live with this bond? He hesitated. Space, he said finally. Not physical, well, that too, but mental, time to adjust. Saralyn nodded immediately. Granted, no demands will be placed on you without warning. And honesty, Elias added. If something I do causes problems in your culture, tell me. Don't let me walk into diplomatic disasters. A very faint smile touched her lips. That is extremely wise. Humans often misunderstand Velari's subtlety. And Velari often misunderstand human bluntness, Elias said. Her smile deepened, not wide but genuine. Then we are already off to a better start than most bonded pairs, she said. They talked for hours, not about politics or law but about practicalities. Schedules, boundaries, how to handle public curiosity, what questions to avoid, what gestures were offensive in Velari culture, how to interpret ear movement which, according to Saralyn, conveyed more than most spoken words. At one point, Elias accidentally asked whether her highborn robes were heavy. Saralyn blinked. Heavy. You look like you're carrying half a chandelier. She stared a moment, then laughed. A real laugh. Not polite amusement, not diplomatic softness. A melodic, surprised sound that filled the room with warmth. Elias found himself smiling despite everything. No human has ever described our ceremonial attire that way, she said, eyes shining. Did I insult you? On the contrary, she said, still smiling faintly. It is refreshing. Most Velari would sooner bite their tongues than speak so plainly. Well, Elias said, humans don't do subtle very well. I've noticed, Saralyn murmured, amusement still lacing her words. The conversation flowed more easily after that. By the time they finished, the sky outside had shifted from violet dusk to deep sapphire night. The city glowed with floating lantern arrays and bioluminescent gardens. Saralyn stood. We should rest. Tomorrow the council expects us to appear united. Elias groaned softly. Great diplomacy. You will be fine, she said. Just stand beside me, speak when spoken to. And try not to tell any ambassadors that their clothing resembles chandeliers. No promises. Saralyn stopped at her bedroom door, turning back slightly. You did not choose this bond, she said quietly. But you are handling it with more grace than many Velari would. I appreciate that. Elias rubbed the back of his neck, still figuring it out. As am I, she admitted. Then she offered a small gesture, Velari palms up acknowledgement. Good night, Elias ran. He mirrored it, clumsy but sincere. "Good night, Saralyn." As her door slid shut, Elias exhaled slowly. He'd entered the annex 3 days ago expecting the worst day of his life. Instead, he had walked out with a responsibility he didn't understand, a bond he hadn't chosen, and a partner he could not quite predict. But 3 weeks into the bond, Elias had begun to understand one universal truth about Velari society. Nothing is simple. Not greetings, not hierarchy, not diplomatic rituals that required 6 different ear positions to avoid accidental insult, and definitely not joint patrol protocols. He learned this the hard way. The incident began in the worst possible place, right at the border between the Human Liaison District and the Velari Honor Guard perimeter. A human patrol of 3 soldiers had wandered too close to a restricted cultural site, one marked only by elegant Velari script and a soft halo of blue light. To human eyes, it looked decorative. To Velari eyes, it screamed, trespassing offense punishable by immediate detainment. The Ulari Honor Guard moved in fast, silent, coordinated, their silver spears activating with a low pulse. The humans reacted exactly as humans always did when surrounded by tall, armed aliens with unreadable expressions. They drew weapons. Within seconds, both sides stood in a rigid semicircle, weapons primed, each convinced the other had acted aggressively. Elias arrived mid-escalation. He had been summoned by a breathless aide. "Sergeant Rand, Lady Saralyn requests your immediate presence, urgent, near the northern transit arch." He found chaos, humans shouting over comms, Velari guards moving in perfect formation, closing the perimeter. A thick tension that tasted metallic in the air. And in the middle of everything, Saralyn, calm, poised, ears angled in subtle irritation as she stepped between the groups. The moment she saw Elias, something eased in her shoulders. He strode through the crowd. "Report." The human corporal snapped to him. "Sir, they surrounded us without warning. We thought it was an ambush." One of the Velari guards snapped back. "They approached a consecrated boundary without authorization. We followed the right of intercept. Your soldiers ignored the warning stance." "Warning stance," the corporal repeated, baffled. "They looked like statues pointing weapons at us." Elias sighed. "Okay, great, everyone calm down." But nobody calmed down. Saralyn stepped beside him, lowering her voice. "This is a cultural misfire. Velari intercept protocols rely on posture, not speech. Humans prioritize verbal communication. Each believes the other at fault." He nodded. "We need to break the stalemate fast." She looked at him with that analytical gaze he was growing used to. "Joint mediation. Joint mediation." They moved forward together, Saralyn radiating authority, Elias radiating human practicality. Saralyn addressed her people first, voice cool and precise. "Stand down the inner circle. Maintain readiness only." These humans did not recognize the sanctity markers. The guards lowered their spears, but only slightly. Elias turned to the humans. "Holster your weapons, now." They weren't attacking. "This is just very dramatic Velari security protocol." "You call that dramatic?" one muttered. "Says the species whose idea of negotiation is shouting until someone gets tired," Elias shot back. That earned a snort from Saralyn, almost a laugh. With both sides minimally calmer, the real work began. Saralyn explained the cultural site and its sacred perimeter. Elias explained the human perspective. "If it doesn't look like a fence or a guard booth, we don't think it's restricted." The Velari guards admitted their signage assumed cultural literacy. The humans admitted they did not, in fact, have universal telepathy. After 20 minutes, tension finally eased. The Velari captain bowed to Saralyn. "Your guidance prevented needless conflict." The human corporal looked at Elias. "You saved us from detention, sir, and from whatever those spear things do." "They hurt," Elias said. "Trust me." When the two factions dispersed, Elias let out a long breath. "That could have gone very badly." "It still might," Saralyn murmured. "Rumors will spread. Interpretations will vary. We must formalize a plan." Already ahead of you. He pulled up a pad. Joint rule updates, multilingual signage, shared protocol training. If we teach each other how not to cause misunderstandings, maybe we'll avoid future standoffs. Saralyn studied him, impressed. Your solutions are always direct. Your solutions always come with 16 layers of nuance, he replied. Between the two of us, we might actually balance this madness. A subtle warmth entered her expression. We work well together. He shrugged. Surprising, isn't it? Her eyes softened, not in a romantic way, not yet, but in the way someone looks at a partner they've finally begun to trust. Yes, she said, surprising and reassuring. They returned to their shared quarters that evening exhausted from briefings, follow-ups, and endless explaining to superiors that no, the humans had not attempted to desecrate a holy site, and no, the Velari had not attempted to abduct an entire patrol. Inside their suite, the tension melted. Saralyn set aside her council datapad, rubbing her temples. How does your species manage to exhaust me so quickly? We're talented, Elias said, dropping onto the couch. Humans specialize in chaos. That is becoming increasingly obvious. She moved to sit near him, not beside but closer than usual, an unspoken acknowledgement of partnership forged in crisis. Elias watched her for a moment. Today could have gone wrong in 100 ways. Thanks for stepping in. It was my duty, she said. No, he corrected. Your duty is council work, research, diplomacy. What you did today was choosing to stand with me. Saralyn hesitated, a rare thing. I did, she admitted softly, and I found it easier than expected. For a heartbeat, the air between them shifted, charged, warm, aware. But then she stood, regaining her regal composure. We should rest. Tomorrow will no doubt bring new challenges. Elias smiled, looking forward to them. She stopped at her doorway, glancing back. You should not be, she said, tone dry. He laughed and she... 6 months passed. Enough time for Varian 3 to rebuild what could be salvaged. Enough time for humans and Velari to revise their protocols. Enough time for Elias and Saralyn to fall into something neither had planned. A rhythm. Mornings with quiet conversation. Shared briefings. Long nights spent refining mediation plans. Meals where Saralyn analyzed human idioms while Elias tried, disastrously, to interpret Velari poetry. Moments where their eyes lingered a little too long. Their bond had started as duty, but somewhere along the way it became something else, something steady, warm, fragile, and unspoken. And then the discovery happened. The Velari starship Velora arrived in orbit carrying artifacts excavated from the ruins of Valar Prime, ancient texts sealed inside crystalline vaults untouched for 3 millennia. The High Council summoned Saralyn immediately. Elias went with her. The archive chamber was breathtaking, walls covered in ancient script glowing with faint bioluminescence, artifacts floating in stasis fields like suspended stars. Scholars bowed to Saralyn as she entered, whispering, "Descendant of the House of Stars, fitting she should see it first." Elias nudged her. "Important family, huh?" "We were once," she murmured, distracted. "Before politics eroded more than history." The chief archivist approached, a tall, silver-haired elder whose ear cuffs shimmered with age and rank. "Lady Saralyn," he said, bowing deeply. "One of the vaults contained a prophecy. A fragment from the Atheria Seers. It references the Kavari'thaal." Saralyn's posture tightened. "A prophecy related to the bond." "Yes, and to humans." Elias blinked. "Me, humans in general." The archivist activated a stasis projection. Velari glyphs spiraled upward like coiling light. Saralyn translated softly, voice thin with disbelief. "When twilight nations stand divided, a union shall form. Between the starborn wanderer from the cradle, and the child of light from the elder line. Through peril shared shall the Kavari'thaal awaken, and through that bond, bridges unbuilt shall rise, lest 2 peoples fall to the silence of misunderstanding." Elias exhaled. "So, it's predicting that humans and Velari need each other." Saralyn nodded slowly. and that a bond like ours was foreseen. Whispers filled the chamber as scholars speculated. The prophecy is fulfilled, look at the timing. She is a Velaris descendant. It aligns perfectly. A human Kavari bond after 3,000 years. This cannot be coincidence. Elias felt eyes on him, evaluating, electric, unsettling. Sarah Lynn's gaze was unreadable. When they left the chamber, she was silent. Deeply, intensely silent. It wasn't until they reached their quarters that Elias finally asked, "What are you thinking?" Sarah Lynn turned toward him. Her expression was controlled, but her eyes, usually bright and assured, were clouded. "The prophecy changes everything," she said. "It places weight on our bond beyond choice or duty. It makes us symbols." "Symbols," Elias echoed. "You don't seem thrilled." "Symbols are never allowed to be simply people," she whispered. He stepped closer. "We don't have to become anything we don't want to be." She looked at him as though she wanted to believe that, but she didn't answer. The next morning delivered the blow neither of them expected. A priority call from Sarah Lynn's homeworld. Encrypted. Family seal. Sarah Lynn opened it, posture stiff. A middle-aged Velari man appeared, regal, severe, bearing the unmistakable markings of high nobility. His resemblance to her was undeniable in the sharp lines of his face, the poised tilt of his head. "Father," she said quietly. "Sarah Lynn," Lord Velaris replied. His voice was smooth and cold as carved obsidian. "Your bond with the human has created complications." Elias' jaw tightened. The Lord continued, "You will return home immediately. Negotiations for your political union with House Velith have resumed. A strategic marriage is required to secure the alliance we discussed. Your accidental bond will be treated as an unfortunate wartime necessity, now concluded." Sarah Lynn went very, very still. "Father," she said, calm but trembling at the edges, "I am already bound. The Kavari'thaal cannot be annulled." Her father's expression barely shifted. "Tradition bends for necessity. The prophecy's emergence only further complicates the matter. We must control its interpretation. Your presence is required." Elias stepped forward. "With respect, sir, Sarah Lynn has responsibilities here." Lord Velaris's gaze raked over Elias like an appraisal of a flawed artifact. A human soldier does not speak in matters of Velari lineage. Elias clenched his fists. Sarah Lynn subtly moved one step closer to him. "I will return," she said, voice low, "but not for a political marriage." Her father's eyes hardened. "You will do your duty." The transmission ended. Silence pressed in. Elias exhaled. "He expects you to marry someone else to pretend our bond doesn't exist." "Yes," she whispered. "Do you want to?" She closed her eyes. "Want is irrelevant. I was raised to serve my house." He felt something crack in his chest, sharp and unexpected. "I'm not asking about duty," he said. "I'm asking about you." Sarah Lynn opened her eyes. And for the first time since he'd met her, they held fear. "Elias, I do not know." He stepped closer. "Then let me ask something simpler. Do you want to leave?" Her voice broke on the smallest sound. "No." The admission hung between them, heavy, fragile, unbearably intimate. But after a moment she straightened, sliding back into her regal armor. "I must go," she said, "to face my family, to understand the full extent of their plans. I owe them that much." He swallowed. "When?" "Tomorrow." Elias nodded slowly, forcing steadiness. "If you need to go, go. I'm not going to hold you to oaths you didn't choose." Sarah Lynn's composure cracked, just a fraction. "You would release me," she whispered. "If it frees you from something you never wanted, then yes." Her breath trembled. "Thank you," she whispered. That night she packed in silence. That night he pretended he wasn't listening. That night neither slept. In the morning she stopped at the threshold of their quarters, turning back. The days after Sarah Lynn left stretched into something Elias didn't have a name for. Not grief, not anger, just emptiness. The suite felt wrong without her. Too quiet, too clean. The air no longer carried the faint floral scent of her robes. The living crystal table didn't glow as brightly without her moving past it. Even the city lights beyond the window seemed dimmer. He threw himself into work, patrol restructuring, alliance briefings, infrastructure repair. His superiors praised his productivity. His fellow soldiers joked that he must have found a second wind. But every night, when the noise of duty faded, the silence pressed in again. He tried not to wonder what she was doing, tried not to imagine her in the vast marble halls of her lineage home, surrounded by nobles who saw her as a political tool rather than a person. He tried not to think about the look in her eyes before she left. He failed every time. On the fourth day, he returned to their suite late, shoulders aching from hauling power conduits across the reconstruction zone. He keyed the door. It slid open. He froze. A travel case rested in the entryway, and Sarah stood inside, back turned, gazing at the window as if she had been waiting for him. For a moment, Elias wondered if he'd fallen asleep on his feet, if she was a dream, a phantom stitched from exhaustion and longing. But then she turned, and her expression, soft, steady, vulnerable, made it real. "You're back," he said quietly. "I'm back," she confirmed. He couldn't move, could barely breathe. Her eyes shimmered faintly, bioluminescence reacting to strong emotion. Her voice, usually controlled and formal, wavered with an edge he had never heard from her. "I faced my father," she said, "and my house, and the council elders. They asked me to break the bond, to abandon you, to accept the political marriage that would strengthen our power." Elias braced himself, and Sarah stepped toward him, one slow, deliberate pace at a time, and I refused. Something in Elias' chest loosened, so sudden it was almost painful. "You refused." His voice cracked embarrassingly. Her lips curved, a small, trembling smile. "I told them the truth. That this bond began as accident but has become choice. That the Kavari'thaal is not a chain but a connection built through trust, through partnership, through you." She was close now, close enough for Elias to see the faint silver veins of light along her cheekbones. "Sarah," he whispered, "you didn't have to." "I did." Her voice softened even more. "As heir to my house, I have always belonged to duty, to expectation, to politics older than I am." She shook her head gently. "But these past months with you were the first time I felt seen as myself, not as a title." He swallowed hard. "I never wanted to take you from your life." "You did not take," she said, stepping even closer. "You offered something different, something honest." Her gaze held his with quiet intensity. "You offered choice." He exhaled shakily. "I thought you'd choose them. I thought it would make more sense." "It would have," she admitted. "But sense is not the same as truth. And truth is." She took the final step forward, standing directly before him now. "I did not want to leave you." His pulse roared in his ears. Her breath trembled once before she spoke again. "Elias," she whispered, "I care for you. Not because the bond demands it, not because tradition expects it, but because you are the only person who looks at me and sees Kayla Velaris, not just Lady Sarah of the Velaris line." He froze. "Kayla," he repeated softly. "My personal name," she said. "Only those I trust may use it." "Kayla," he tried it again, and her eyes softened like starlight dimming into dusk. "Yes," she breathed. "Only you." Their silence was warm now, charged, fragile, perfect. Elias lifted a hand slowly, giving her time to step back. She didn't. He brushed his fingers gently against her cheek. Her skin glowed faintly beneath his touch, responding instinctively to contact. Her eyes fluttered closed for the briefest moment. When she opened them again, something inside them had changed, something fearless. "I came back," she whispered, "because I choose you." Something in Elias unraveled quietly, beautifully. "Then stay," he said, "because I choose you too." Her breath caught, and then she leaned forward, resting her forehead lightly against his. A Velari gesture of deep emotional offering, one he knew she had never given anyone casually. He closed his eyes, returning the gesture with equal care. Their bond hummed between them, quiet, ancient, alive. The following weeks were a blur of new negotiations. Sarah publicly refused her arranged marriage. Velith nobles protested. Her father raged. Alliance diplomats panicked. But something remarkable happened. For the first time in centuries, humans and Velari began discussing not treaties, not boundaries, not trade disputes, but relationships, understanding what it meant to truly coexist. And Elias and Saralyn unexpectedly, unwillingly at first, became the living example of that bridge. Not perfect, not symbolic, just real. 1 year after the collapse on Varian 3, they stood together again, this time not before nobles or generals, but among close friends and allies, in a quiet garden adorned with soft lanterns and floating crystal blooms. A human officiant stood between them. Elias Rahan, the officiant said, do you choose Saralyn Velaris, not by accident, not by ancient ritual, but by your own will? Elias took her hands gently. I do. And I choose her every day after. Saralyn's eyes shimmered. The officiant turned to her. Saralyn Velaris, do you choose Elias Rahan, not by prophecy, not by tradition, but by your own will? She squeezed his hands, voice steady and luminous. I do, and I choose him beyond what prophecy could ever contain. They exchanged vows, simple ones, human ones, chosen ones. When the ceremony concluded, Saralyn leaned close, touching her forehead to his again, this time with soft laughter tangled in her breath. This, she murmured, I never expected. Saving you in that collapsing building, Elias said. Neither did I. No, her voice turned tender, choosing you and being chosen in return. He kissed her slow, warm, unhurried.